Hey everyone, welcome to Open by Accident. Matt here. Today I wanted to share with you a couple of game pickups for the Sega Genesis, as well as give you a status update on my Polymega Game System. Let's get right into it. So getting right into the pickups, we got two new Sega Genesis games for my collection. These games are actually items that I've been looking for quite a while and just was looking for that reasonable price, and I wanted them in complete condition. So the first one we got is Desert Strike. Desert Strike is a single-player campaign set in the Desert Storm War in 1991. This game kind of follows a loose story, based upon what was going on in the Middle East around that time. This game has like an isometric view where you're basically controlling an attack helicopter, and you have missions to complete, such as rescuing MIAs or destroying power plants, basically, maneuvering so you can kill that madman. This game's a lot of fun, and it actually spawned quite a few sequels over numerous systems. Jungle Strike and Urban Strike were also on the Sega Genesis. As a kid, I actually had Urban Strike. Now, Desert Strike, I originally played on the Super Nintendo when I was younger. It was a rental. I remember renting it over a weekend with my older brother, and we spent a lot of time playing that. And the same night, we also rented World Heroes on the Super Nintendo. So I do have a childhood experience with Desert Strike. So being able to go and pick it up on the Sega Genesis in complete form was really a nice addition to the game collection. This game's a lot of fun. It's got good replayability because the campaign's a lot of fun. There's a bunch of missions on each level, so it's got good gameplay. The gameplay is spot on. You have multiple weapons to choose from, such as light missiles, heavy missiles, and then a machine gun. You have to keep control of your fuel consumption, as well as how many ammunition rounds and missiles you have in your inventory, because you can run out if you just go in, guns a-blazing. This game is a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it. I was actually able to pick this up, I think, on a really good deal, considering it is complete. I found it at a local game store for $9.99. Normally on price charting, this game goes for around that maybe $15 to $20 range. So being able to pick it up for $10, I think that was a bargain. This game's going to get a lot of play time with me. I already own Jungle Strike on the Sega Genesis, so now all I have to do is just go back and find that childhood copy of Urban Strike, because I know I did trade it in years ago, probably when I was moving on to the next generation of game systems like the Sega Saturn or the PlayStation. But I'd love to own Urban Strike again and have the original trilogy on the Sega Genesis. Like I said, it did spawn a lot of sequels. Over on the next gen, like the PlayStation and Nintendo 64, you also had Soviet Strike as well as Nuclear Strike. So there are quite a few games in this series. They all kind of play the same. So it's a great series if you're into that type of gameplay. Next up, we picked up Golden Axe 2 on the Sega Genesis. So Golden Axe 2, obviously a sequel. This game is a side-scrolling like beat 'em up, you know, where you can play cooperatively and you're just going through bashing the baddies. You can pick from 3 different characters. You've got a woman warrior, you've got the barbarian, you've got a dwarf, and they all have their own unique weapons and unique magic spells to cast on the enemies. This game's a lot of fun, especially if you have somebody to play it with in the co-op mode. Going through this, I love beat 'em ups, so Golden Axe 2 is kind of a no-brainer. This game basically just builds on the original Golden Axe, just improving gameplay as well as the graphics. This game also has a secondary mode beyond just the beat 'em up campaign. You have like a versus mode where you can, as a solo, go through and fight, you know, waves of enemies, whether it's, you know, a single one-on-one battle or battling multiple enemies, you know, in like an arena-based setting. You can also duel it out with your friend and go head-to-head. So it adds a little bit to the game. That mode kind of reminds me a lot of what was in Double Dragon on the original Nintendo, where you had that versus fighting mode, kind of like a precursor to those like Street Fighters, Tekkens, and Mortal Kombat type games. This game is a lot of fun. As far as replayability goes, this is a game that I probably wouldn't go back to multiple times in a year, but maybe once a year go through and play it, because I love beat 'em ups. And Golden Axe 2 is definitely a nice addition to the collection. You know, finding it in complete form is kind of difficult these days, and especially at a decent price. I paid $24.99 the same time I picked up Desert Strike. The game is well worth $25. I'm thinking that it goes for around the $40 range normally, so finding it for 25 bucks in complete form, it was a no-brainer. So I highly recommend both of these games that I picked up, Golden Axe 2 as well as Desert Strike. So, you know, all in, you know, after taxes, I'm around like 40 bucks for 2 great games on the Sega Genesis. And, you know, I have been kind of on a hiatus of buying retro games. You know, I've talked about getting rid of and downsizing my Nintendo 64 collection, but things have kind of changed since buying the Polymega Game System, because it's an all-in-one game system where I can back up my ROMs, you know, and play games like Golden Axe 2 and Desert Strike. So it's kind of brought back that energy that I was looking for in my retro game collecting, and I really am enjoying my Polymega. So with that, we've got a big update on the status of my personal Polymega. Before we jump too deep into it, I just want to let everybody know that this channel is meant to entertain and educate and inform. And this segment really is just to inform you of what I'm going through with my personal Polymega. I did buy this Polymega secondhand, so while it was advertised as in perfect working condition, ultimately I kind of got myself into this mess by buying it used. So to give a little more backstory, because I have touched on this a little bit in a previous video, I did buy a used Polymega system with 4 of the modules. This was back around right before Christmas, December, and I received it sometime after Christmas. Right out of the box, I've had issues with it. The biggest issue being that when I try to boot up my Polymega system, it gets stuck on the Polymega logo and just sits there and cycles and cycles. At the time, it was on the latest update. I did not update it to the newest firmware because I was afraid with the issues I was having of it going through the boot cycle that it may cause other issues. So, you know, with that happening, I kind of, you know, tried troubleshooting it with what I knew how to do, like unplugging everything and leaving it powered down for multiple time, you know, going through multiple power cycles. And the system will power on and boot up properly, but sometimes it can take 2 or 3 tries. Sometimes it can take 20 tries. And sometimes it can take up to an hour to get it to go. So with, you know, cycling with that power button on and off so many times, it created another issue where the power button was getting stuck on the system. And when that button was kind of stuck, it was kind of in the compressed state. So when you try to power it back on, it immediately power back off. You almost had to kind of like pry the button away from the system to get it to then power on properly to get to that boot cycle where it gets stuck on the Polymega logo. So there's 2 issues that I'm dealing with. The third issue, you know, I work things out with the seller. I left the transaction happy given the circumstances of what was going on. So this is nothing on the seller. And I knew about this issue when I said, fine, I'll deal with this on my own. I will contact Polymega and see if I can come up with a remedy and fix it by myself, or whether I got to send it in for repair. But ultimately, a 1 terabyte SSD was installed in the system. And unfortunately, the cover was not reinstalled properly. You know, the screw was kind of put in crooked or cross-threaded, where you cannot get it out without damaging the system further. So my theory is that possibly the SSD maybe not seated properly, whether it got, you know, jarred in shipping, and maybe that's why it's not booting up every time. It's just a theory, it's not an answer. But ultimately I can't get to the SSD drive because that cover is basically stuck in that screw. Just when you turn it, it just spins. So I've got 3 major issues with my Polymega. I contacted Polymega, and this was probably like a week into ownership because of the initial issue. It took them about a week to respond, and they asked for a video, you know, showing what the system was doing. So I, you know, within a day, 24 hours, I sent them a video and let them know what I was going through. And then fast forward, I sent them another email because I started having the other issues with the power button, as well as the issue with the cover. And, you know, I reached out on the online forums as well as the Discord, and we had, you know, somebody kind of said, well, the power button, you probably need to pull it away. People suggested taking apart the system, and I was like, I don't really want to take apart the system because it potentially is still under warranty because it was purchased within the last year by the previous owner. So ultimately I didn't do any of that. So I sent another email to Polymega because it had been like 2-3 weeks since I sent them the video, and no response. And then finally, about a week and a half ago, I got a response from them, and I was hoping for like, hey, let's try this, reboot the system, you know, do a hard reset, something of that nature. But I got nothing. It was just, it looks like we need to take a look at your system. And they gave me the information to send it in. So it's been a week now that I've had it sent in. Based upon what I have seen online, turnaround times on getting your system repaired can take upwards of a month or more. Hopefully I'm not without my system for a substantial amount of time, but there's really no telling. You know, Polymega and Polymega, they're a relatively new company. The system, the best I can describe, is fragile. You know, it's not necessarily in physical form, but as far as like the stability of how the system works. You know, a wrong configuration while you're doing an update can basically, you know, brick the system. And I don't know exactly what problem I'm having because it doesn't seem like in my research that other people are experiencing the same issue that I am. Now, you know, whether the previous owner was having these issues as well, that's up for debate. But ultimately, you know, I questioned it, talked with him. He was super nice. And we worked out things between us. And so there's nothing on the seller about this particular situation. It's all on me at this point. But ultimately, Polymega has my game system. For how long, I don't know. I had a lot of big plans to use my Polymega for future videos. And it's kind of delayed my process of putting out videos because I had plans of using it and things just aren't working out the way I'd hoped. Like I said, this isn't necessarily a negative on Polymega because there could have been an issue created by myself or the previous owner of this game system. You know, I don't know if that SSD that's installed is causing that issue because it did get shipped to me with it installed. You know, the cover is not installed properly, so was the SSD installed properly? It could be as simple as that, or it could be there's a software issue with the system. The sad part is there's a lot of new and exciting things coming out for Polymega in the coming months and years. You know, there's been an announcement 4+ years ago about light gun support, and they're going to put out a light gun, and supposedly they're coming out this quarter, but you know, we kind of got a leak within the last week that they're going to put out a couple more collections, and it's like, well, I'm interested in the collections. I don't want to sit there and invest more money into this Polymega ecosystem if I don't have a working system. And you know, with that, it's like, why aren't they working on pushing out the light guns that got announced years ago versus more collections? So, you know, in my opinion, you know, Playmagi's putting out a great product. They just need to, you know, focus on what they've already announced versus putting out more new products to, you know, kind of put us at bay, if you will. But ultimately, I will be without my Polymega base system. I still have all my modules. My modules worked fine. The controllers worked fine. It was just that base unit, getting it to boot up, and then that created other issues from me sitting there power cycling it so many times and then not being able to remove the SSD to see if that was an issue. So we'll see what happens. I would imagine I'll probably have some sort of repair bill, and I'll kind of keep you guys updated if you're interested, you know, as to the outcome of what happens with my Polymega Game System. But with me not being the original owner, like I was saying, I'd probably imagine there's going to be a repair bill, especially since the cover needs to be repaired on the bottom of the SSD. You know, that's on me at this point. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. The pickups for the Sega Genesis were awesome. I got to play them on the Polymega a little bit. That's where I captured the game footage. But that was before, you know, I sent the Polymega in, obviously, and we'll just see what happens with it. So make sure you guys stick around for more content to come, and we appreciate you watching so much.